Good afternoon, dear students. Hope you are all fine and taking care of yourselves. We will continue conservatism as a political ideology. This is lecture 10. And the source that we will depend on is Andrew Haywood's book, Political Ideologies, an Introduction. So conservatism, as we discussed it, is a political ideology, and there's some cornerstones for conservatism regarding social and political affairs and also regarding economics. So some people don't see that conservatism is really a political ideology. It's just a collection of ideas defending the status quo or preserving what's there. So it's not really a political ideology. It doesn't provide a vision for change, a vision for a new future like any other ideology. But actually, in Edmund Burke's point of view, he mentioned that we need some change, but a gradual change to have a better future. So their conservatism as a political ideology is based on this point of view that we need to preserve traditions and institutions. So regarding social and political affairs, as we discussed last time, conservatism is pro-organic society, pro-preservation of the status quo and the traditional institutions. So all the institutions survive and work well because they are the accumulated wisdom and experience of the past. And also regarding the organic society, that society is like a natural organism that has changed slowly but over a long period of time. Conservatism is based also on the idea of reform, and it should be piecemeal, meaning that it should be in pieces that together form a whole. So it's it's a piecemeal change, and it's slow and it's cautious. Conservatism holds a very pessimistic view of human nature. So it holds a point of view that people are selfish, are irrational. So that would lead to civil disturbance. So we need to have a social hierarchy in the society and to put citizens in this social order. And we need a strong state, maybe an authoritarian state, to maintain that political order. Conservatism also rejects ideas about that human nature is good or people are perfect. So that's why we need a strong police and legal system to maintain the social order, and a strong army to protect the state from its enemies. So strong police and a strong army. As for political affairs, conservatives generally believe in representative democracy. So democracy is best preserved in the hands of relatively small and well-educated elite. They don't trust masses, they trust only the small and well-educated elites. So masses are not naturally democratic, and they are very dangerous. That would lead to great disruption in the society if we leave space for them. So representative democracy is the best. And of course, the direct democracy is very hard, and we can't achieve it, and they don't trust masses. They trust only the well-educated people. So they believe in meritocracy, people of merit, people with good education. As for inequality, they believe that people are inherently unequal in intelligence and abilities. So we won't have economic or social equality. That's unlike socialism, as if you remember. So they don't believe that there can be any form of equality in a society, but they said that the rich should be responsible to the poor, and they would provide them with what they need. As for the economy, they believed in the invisible hand of the market. They believe in the importance of the market and economic competition. And they believed in the invisible hand of the market, that each one individual, when he acts for his own interests, that would lead for the benefit of the whole population. So economic competition is reinforced, and if everybody produces the best good, that would be for the customers' happiness, that each one would be that competition is good for the market. So when people compete to produce the best good, that would lead to a good society, and customers will be happy for that. So customers also are rational. They know what's best for them. So market competition and individual self-interest get along together, and there would be all the time maximization of happiness, and they would know what's best for them. Let us now have a look upon the different forms of conservatism. We discussed them briefly last time. So authoritarian conservatism is one of them. So authoritarian conservatism is a tradition within conservatism that favored authoritarian rule, and that was especially in continental Europe. So we took a famous thinker, Joseph de Maistre, and he was a fierce critic of the French Revolution, and he didn't like a revolution as Burke, but Burke would say that we need some reform, we don't want revolution, but he didn't call for restoring absolute power. But Joseph de Maistre, unlike that, said that we should have an absolute power and we should return to that regime. So he favored absolutist regimes. So that's, from here came the idea of authoritarian conservatism, that conservatism couldn't be there except with authoritarian rule. So there has to be a preservation of order and security, and that's the best for the society, that we have a strong leader who would maintain safety and security within society. And he mentioned that revolution and even reform would weaken the change that bind people together and lead to a descent into chaos and oppression. So he was against revolution. So conservatives remained with this idea of authoritarianism, linking conservatism to authoritarianism. In Russia, for example, Tsar Nicholas I mentioned that orthodoxy and autocracy and nationality would be linked, and he favored them to the ideas of the French Revolution, liberté, égalité, and fraternité. So that's liberty, equality, and fraternity. So he believed in autocracy and authoritarian rule. And conservative elites remained very powerful in the early 20th century in Italy and Germany, and they were against any parliamentary democracy, and that brought Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler to power. And that led to the rise of fascist movement, which fascism is a rightist movement, as you know. Also, authoritarian conservatism took place around the world. For example, Juan Perón was the dictator of Argentina, and he was a very authoritarian, and he ruled Argentina in terms of those ideas: obedience, order, and national unity. As for paternalistic conservatism, that's another form of conservatism. It was based on Edmund Burke's writings. He mentioned that a state without the means of some change is without any means of conservation, and we have two main traditions of paternalistic conservatism, which are one nation conservatism and Christian democracy. One nation conservatism is an Anglo-American paternalistic tradition, and one of the main figures of this form of conservatism is Benjamin Disraeli, who was the Prime Minister of Britain in the period of 1870-1880, and he wrote a very important different writings on the importance of having one nation. So that from here comes the idea of one nation conservatism. He drew attention to the danger of Britain being divided into two nations, the rich and the poor, and he suggested that wealth and privilege would be brought with social obligations, so there has to be a responsibility for the poor and less well off. and he said that there's a great threat in having very poor classes without any help from the rich classes. And he said that society should be held together by this acceptance of the social rights, duty, and obligations, and he believed that society is naturally hierarchical. So one nation conservatism is based on those values and principles. So it was a type of conservatism and was very popular in Britain until in 1970s when Margaret Thatcher, Britain's Prime Minister at that time, brought the new right principles, which we will take at the end of this lecture. And it was based on the ideas of, so one nation conservatism was based on the ideas of Benjamin Disraeli, and also there was a focus on the importance of having an organic society, that society exists and develops organically and people should help each other. So each member in the society has an obligation towards others. So another concept that is important when we're studying conservatism is Toryism. So Tories was the term referred in the 18th century. Later, it was the Conservative Party was formed. So conservatives were earlier coined the Tories, and you will find this sometimes. You will find conservatives as Tories. You will find it in the literature as well and in the writings that they still mention the name Tories, but that was commonly used in the 18th century Britain, and they supported monarchical rule and the rule of Church of England at the expense of the nobility. So Toryism believed in hierarchy, in tradition, in duty, in organicism. Another form of paternalistic conservatism is Christian democracy. From its name, you would see that it's based on Christian ideas. So not all forms of conservatism were based on religious ideas, but this form of conservatism is based on linking Christianity and democracy. It was based on Catholic social theory, so based on Catholicism. And they mentioned the importance of social partnerships of churches, unions, and businesses, and they believed in a social market economy. So Christian democracy developed very much in the aftermath of the World War II. So conservatives abandoned their authoritarian beliefs, and a new form of conservatism was committed to political democracy, influenced by the paternalistic social traditions of Catholicism. Catholicism, as you know, is unlike Protestantism. It focuses on the social group rather than the individual. So Protestantism was based on the importance of the individual and how he would work and develop. Catholics don't believe in this. They believe in the importance of social groups, and they stress upon balance and organic harmony rather than competition. So Catholic social theory after the 1945 encouraged newly formed Christian democratic parties to practice a form of democratic corporatism that highlighted the importance of intermediate institutions. So they didn't, unlike one nation conservatism, they didn't tackle very much the importance of those intermediate institutions as churches, but Christian democracy highlighted the importance of the role of the church and business groups to achieve conservatism. They believed in the importance of social market, and they believed that this would lead to the achievement of broader social goals. The third form of conservatism is Libertarian Conservatism. So after we studied Authoritarian Conservatism and Paternalistic Conservatism, we would take Libertarian Conservatism. And conservatism was influenced really by liberal ideas. So here we can see how ideologies interact together and influence each other. So conservatism was influenced by liberal ideas in the late 20th century. So New Right came and they were advocating a lot of the principles of classical liberalism and most importantly neoliberalism. So neoliberalism was the renewal of classical liberalism as we studied. So New Right merged with the ideas of classical liberalism and neoliberalism. So they believed, those libertarian conservatives believed that we won't have this very big government or the authoritarian government as authoritarian conservatism, but we will have the least possible government regulation of social life. So here we witness a conversion of the ideas of conservatism, but they didn't abandon completely the ideas like authority, like duty, but they became interested in some of the new liberal ideas. So they believed in economic individualism and getting government off the back of the business. So Libertarian conservatism also had a very pessimistic view of human nature, but we will have a strong state. We will ensure authority is respected, and we will see some examples of new right parties right now, and you will follow from their ideologies. If you read some news or you follow the news, you would see how new right ideology is portrayed nowadays and how it is manifested. So as a comparison, like what libertarian conservatism is a little bit different from traditional conservatism in terms of a belief in an atomistic individualism, so more a belief in the importance of the individual, not an organic society. They believe in meritocracy, that people of good merit, of good qualities would rule. They believe in economic rights. They believe in laissez-faire economics, meaning leaving the market or making like an invisible hand that leave a space for, so merging with liberalism, so leave space for the different institutions. And they are anti-welfare states. So conservatives believed in the authoritarian state. Early conservatives believed in the authoritarian state, and they believed in maybe a welfare state in order to preserve some order in the society, to give the least advantaged some goods and help them. But libertarian conservatism doesn't believe in this, so it's anti-welfarism as reflected in Thatcherite policies, as we will discuss it right now. So it's a libertarian conservatism is also a bit radical. It's not that traditional. It believes in egoism, that everybody has his ego. It believes in competition. It believes that we have to have a market order, and that would lead us to a good economy. So leaving everything for the market and making the state less intervening in the society. Those are different books written about the New Right, in case you're interested to read more about New Right ideology. So from the New Deal to the New Right, New Right versus Old Right, the New Right, Politics, Markets, and Citizenship. So those are different writings for extra reading. So New Right involves the marriage of neoliberal and neoconservative ideas. So it has some of the neoliberal and neoconservative beliefs. So it's economically libertarian and socially authoritarian. So they would believe that we would have tax cuts, we would have a greater censorship of television, so a role of the state, but regarding economy, you would be more liberal, leave the market. So making tax cuts on businesses to leave them maximize their interests, and that will trickle down to the poor people. So that leave everything for the market, as we discussed neoliberalism. They also, new right movements and parties are against immigration because they believe that this is the real threat nowadays in front of many European countries. So new right parties in Germany, in France, would believe that there's a great importance of having a strong state to limit immigration because this threatens the order and security inside the society. So, new right is a marriage between two contrasting ideological traditions. First, the classical liberal economics and the free market theories of Adam Smith, and they maintained a critique of the idea of big government and Keynes' ideas. So they were critical of any form of economic and social intervention, as Keynes mentioned. So that's called the liberal new right or neoliberalism. Another form of conservatism or the new right is based on traditional conservatism characterized by defense of order, authority, and discipline, and that is called conservative new right or neoconservatism, and we have a comparison right now. So we have a tension within conservatism between two trends, between the liberal new right and the conservative new right. So the liberal new right would be pro-merging liberalism and conservatism. So based on the idea of classical liberalism, based on atomism, so the idea of atomism and individuality. It's a bit radical, it's libertarian, it believes in self-interest, it believes in equality of opportunity, it believes in minimal state. So minimal state means that the state is very limited, it doesn't intervene in the economy, and also it believes in internationalism. So they believe that globalization is important and that we will have an international society, we will be open. Conservative new right, those are the very conservatives who are anti-liberal ideas. They believe in authoritarianism, or we can call it authoritarian new right. So conservative new right or authoritarian new right believes in natural hierarchy in a very strong state. They are keen on ensuring nationalism, so they are against internationalism. So we can have closed borders and we don't want very much globalization. It's better for us to have a strong state, a strong society, but we don't need to merge with other nations very strongly. So new right, the liberal one, maintains a shift away from Keynesian economics, and it's committed to individual liberty. Conservative new right is based on restoration of authority and public morality and nationalism. So those are the key differences between the liberal new right and the conservative or authoritarian new right. New right was very strong in the 1970s because it was an age of economic difficulty, and Keynesian welfare state was not the solution. At that time, there were economic difficulties, so Keynesian welfare state was very strong after the Great Depression, 1930s, but in the 1970s, the welfare state was not the solution. So a lot of leaders like Margaret Thatcher thought about a new form of state or a new role of state. So she mentioned that we reduce the role of the state within economic affairs, and she implemented a range of policies like privatization, like deregulation, and she even opposed the Tory leaders at that time, and of course she opposed the left-wing unions and local councils. So she believed that deregulation is important to innovation. So in order to have a good society, we would have deregulation, meaning that we'll have less regulation from the state to the economy, and we would lower the taxes on great enterprises and and international like companies and very strong companies, and that would lead to growth. So she limited any healthcare expenses for the poor, and she just thought that it's better to leave everything for, so she lowered all the expenses and social expenses, and she lowered taxes as well, and that would lead to the very end to growth. So the new right advocated the rolling back of the state, or the rolling back the state, meaning that we would lessen the role of the state, making it have a less role in the market and society. So if we compare again between the traditional conservatism and the new right, traditional conservatives believed in a strong state, while the new right believed in a strong but minimal state. Traditional conservatism believed in welfare state and authoritarianism, but the new right combining economic libertarianism with social authoritarianism, and that's just a summary of what we mentioned right now. If you remember this diagram, we took it when we were discussing the definition of ideology. So you can see here the new right on this chart, that the new right is authoritarian politically, and it's rightist in terms of the economy. So here you can find new right, and also you can find fascism and Nazism, which are on the extreme right hand side. You can see that it maintains greater authority and it's more rightist, so that from here you can see where is new right located on the map of ideologies. The last part in this lecture tackles conservatism in a global age. So conservatism, or the new right, was very strong in some point of time in the 1970s, for example, in Thatcherite policies. It was strong also at different times, and it was affected by the remodeling of the world economy following the collapse of the Bretton Woods system. And conservatism also is considered right now in today's age a counter-globalizing force. So it is against globalization in one way or another, and we will discuss this in detail. So conservatism witnessed a very heroic moment in the time of Thatcher and Reagan in the United States of America. So Thatcher in the UK and by Reagan in the United States of America. And conservatism was always a form of a counter-globalizing or counter-globalization. So you probably have heard of some far-right anti-immigration parties which are against multiculturalism or having different cultures in the society. So, for example, new right parties in France would be against any form of immigration of different cultures, of people from different cultural backgrounds being inside France, like from different regions, like from the Arab world. So they would believe that this threatens the French culture. So those far-right anti-immigration parties are against multiculturalism. And new right parties became a feature of many European states right now. So they were threatened by the idea of immigration, and they believed that immigration was the real problem for their nation, and they threatened it, and immigration is probably somehow linked to terrorism, to lack of security in those European cities and states. So for example, some political parties, we have the National Rally, previously known as Front National or National Front in France, and it's led by Marie Le Pen, and she's the daughter of the founder of the party, Jean-Marie Le Pen. And This party attracted great electoral support in the 1980s and was based on a resistance to immigration. So that's a photo for Marine Le Pen. Anti-immigration and anti-multiculturalist parties also include the Freedom Party in Austria, the British National Party, Northern League in Italy, and the Danish People's Party, and Vlaam Blok in Belgium. Those are logos of new right parties or conservative parties nowadays. For example, the Lega Nord or the Northern League in Italy and the British National Party. At last, I would like you to think about an answer to these questions. Why and to what extent have conservatives supported tradition? So, to what extent conservatives supported tradition, and why did they think that tradition is important in their societies? And how far do conservatives go in endorsing authority? Whether all conservatives favor extreme authority or not. So how far do conservatives go in endorsing authority? And last, why and how have conservatives sought to resist globalization? So why new right parties resist globalization and the path they take? What's their agenda? What's their party program? How they see that globalization is a threat to their society and how they resist it.